So when the Prophet Muhammad passed away, the young Muslim community, well, they faced its greatest crisis. A lot of what you read paints this picture of intense political drama, a mad scramble for power. But what if that common narrative totally misses the real story? We're going to explore how this pivotal moment wasn't really about a power grab, but about something much deeper, the triumph of principle and brotherhood.
Right, so was this a bitter feud? A power struggle between the Prophet's closest companions? I mean, that's the story we often hear. But was it really just a chaotic grab for control, or was something much more principled at play? That's the big question we're digging into today, using the direct historical sources.
And boom, this quote right here from our source material just gets straight to the heart of it. It completely challenges that idea of some deep, bitter conflict. It suggests that the bonds they had, the ones forged by their faith, were way stronger than any political disagreements. And this idea right here is absolutely central to unpacking what really went down. Okay, so here's our game plan for how we're going to break this down. We'll start by setting the scene of the crisis, then we'll completely dismantle that myth of a power grab. After that, we'll explore the true character of Sa'd ibn Ubādah, look at the principles that guided the decision, and check out the signs the Prophet himself left behind. And finally, we'll see how it all came together in a true triumph of brotherhood. All right, first, you gotta put yourself in their shoes. Just imagine the profound shock, the grief. The leader who had guided every single aspect of their lives was gone. The future was completely uncertain, and the need for unity and clear leadership was just absolutely paramount to hold everything together. So, the key players in all this fall into two main groups. First, you have the Muhajirin, the immigrants, who had left everything behind in Mecca to be with the Prophet. And then you have the Ansar, the helpers, the local people of Medina who welcomed them with open arms. Understanding these two groups is really key to understanding the discussion that happened at Saqifah. Okay, this brings us right to the myth of the power grab. And we've got to tackle the elephant in the room. Was this some kind of pre-planned conspiracy, a backroom deal for power, or was it a genuine consultation that was born out of a real crisis? And this, right here, just cuts through all the noise. The popular rumor is that there was this secret pact between three of the most senior companions to seize control. But the source material couldn't be clearer. There is no sound report to back this up. It says they feared Allah too much to do such a thing. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was a response. Now, a huge part of that whole power struggle story revolves around this one man, Sa'd ibn Ubādah, the leader of the Ansar. He's often painted as this bitter political rival, but who was he really? Was he a man driven by ambition, or was he a man driven by faith? So let's look at his resume, okay? Sa'd wasn't just some random politician. He was a veteran of the Battle of Badr. That's the highest honor you could have. He was famous for his incredible generosity. The Prophet himself relied on him. He consulted with him. This was a man with a deep, proven commitment to Islam, not someone who would just tear the community apart for his own personal gain. And this is where the popular myth really falls apart. Some reports claim Sa'd became some kind of separatist, that he refused to give his allegiance to Abu Bakr. But the source texts are direct. They call this idea false and is pure fabrication. The truth is, sound reports confirm he did swear allegiance, putting the unity of the community above everything else. And get this, here are Sa'd's own words from that debate. After hearing all the arguments, he accepted the outcome. He said that the Ansar would be the advisors and the Muhajirin would be the rulers. Now that is not the statement of a bitter rival. That is the submission of a believer to a principle he understood was for the greater good. So you have to ask, why? Why did Sa'd and the Ansar accept this? What was the principle that was so important? Well, this wasn't about one tribe being better than another. It was about following a specific piece of guidance from the Prophet that was meant to keep the entire community stable and strong. You see, that whole meeting at Saqifah, it was basically a real-world application of a core Islamic principle, shura, which means consultation. This comes directly from the Quran, where God tells the Prophet to, quote, consult them in the matter. So they weren't just arguing. They were actually doing the exact process they had been taught to follow to figure out the best way forward. And right in the middle of this consultation, Abu Bakr brings up this statement from the Prophet. It was a hadith, a recorded teaching that the Ansar immediately recognized as authentic. And just like that, this prophetic guidance provided the textual proof they needed, and it shifted the whole debate from just opinions to established principle. But, and this is absolutely critical,
This wasn't some kind of blank check. This authority came with some very strict conditions. The very same teachings that gave them this authority also warned that it was only valid as long as the leaders were just, as long as they showed kindness, and as long as they upheld the religion. If they failed at that authority was gone. And just to be crystal clear, the logic here was never about one tribe being better than another. The Quraysh were recognized across Arabia, and their leadership was seen as the key to preventing this fragile alliance of tribes from just splintering apart after the Prophet's death. The goal was stability and preserving the faith for everyone.
But it wasn't just this one teaching. The companions started looking back, connecting the dots, and they saw that the Prophet himself had kind of left a trail of breadcrumbs, pointing towards who he intended to be his successor. And two signs in particular were just impossible to ignore. First, there was a dream the Prophet had where he was drawing water, a powerful symbol of nurturing the community. And who takes over the task from him? Abu Bakr. And second, and maybe even more powerful, was that public act during his final days, his repeated insistence that only Abu Bakr should lead the people in prayer.
Now, you really can't overstate how big of a deal this was. For the companions, the Prophet choosing someone to lead the prayer in his place, in his own mosque, well, that was an unmistakable signal. It showed that person's precedence over everyone else. It established their status as the best among them. And crucially, everyone understood it as a leader appointing his deputy, making his preference clear for all to see.
So when you put all of these pieces together, the picture that emerges is, well, it's completely different from the whole political coup story. The outcome at Saqifa wasn't because of a bitter feud. It was something else entirely. Because in the end, the companions didn't feel like they were making some random choice out of thin air. They truly believed they were simply confirming the decision that the Prophet himself had already pointed to through his words, his dreams, and his actions. It was an act of ratification, not invention.
And this final quote from our source material really just ties it all together beautifully. The decision was reached through a process that was completely rooted in their faith, mutual consultation, referencing sacred texts, and applying reason. It was a methodical application of their principles in a moment of pure crisis. And that's the real story here. In a moment of intense grief and incredible pressure, a moment when emotions and personal ambitions could have so easily taken over, the shared spiritual training these companions had received from the Prophet won the day. Brotherhood and principle triumphed over politics. And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? Beyond the specific history, what does this story tell us about the challenge and the potential of a community that truly tries to place shared principles and unity above individual desires and ambitions? It's a question that's just as relevant today as it was then.